Hey there, it's Keith Hayden, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Novelist Podcast. If you're looking to get a novel started quick, fast, then head over to my website or hit the link around this video or this audio recording because you're going to find a link to 4 questions to answer about your story, and then you'll immediately get sent an instant novel very quick to get those ideas flowing and get you writing. That's all going to be at keithhayden.net. In today's episode, I'm gonna slow things down today. I've been doing a lot of shorter videos for social media and things like that, but I much prefer these longer form type of videos to actually dive in and talk about a chapter and give you just some insights about how these things kind of come together, especially with my style, which tends to be very synthesis oriented. It might seem I don't really know how it seems from the outside, but I know as I'm going through it, I'm in so many different headspaces. And I think today's chapter 33 is a good one to really deep dive into. Deep dive. I just said that and I was thinking of the Google LM outputs, how they do the deep dives. I've listened to so many of the AI deep dives that I'm like, man, I want to do my own because I think it would be very interesting to you with this chapter. Chapter 33 is special for the first reason why it's special is that it is the longest chapter in the book so far. It came in at a whopping 2,300 words. This is a very long chapter. Um, yeah, and there's a lot that happens. This is an action chapter, and how I write these chapters, I used to really have a hard time writing action, just because in my mind, I'm seeing the action take place, and I'm trying to like record what's happening, but without getting too stuck in the nitty gritty details. I explained it to another author like this. You wanna write action basically like a comic strip. You see somebody who's gonna throw a kick, they have a determined look, leg cocks back, boom, it snaps, other guy gets hit. That's what you want. You wanna avoid the tangle of words. I've really seen action sequences really crumble under their own weight of too much description. Well, her elbow bent, and then it was locked with her arm, and then it just gets really nasty if you don't kind of think through it. So that's why I tend to write my action just kind of in a shot of of writing. When I'm writing the original draft, like I remember writing this chapter and I knew I was going to have to do some significant work on it because it was too film strip like. It was disjointed, not enough things connected. And so yeah, that's the other thing, that this chapter was a challenge because it's there's plot resolution. You end chapter 32 with this mystery. Tengo's been called off by this voice and you don't know where it's leading him. And the first sentence in chapter 33 is Tingle followed the voice to the side of the highway, to the side of Highway 58. And if you've ever lived in Okinawa, that is already sending chills. Your heart rate's already up, right? Because Highway 58 is probably the deadliest road in Okinawa, especially around this area that I'm referencing. Um, when I was living in Okinawa, I've run that road so many times, and people just fly down this road because it on one side is the American base, Kadena Air Base, and the other side is another American-owned property. And so there's no place to stop. There are some restaurants, there are some like convenience stores on this strip of road, but it's pretty much like it's like a fucking speedway, basically. People just open up and they're flying at like they could be flying like 100 kilometers per hour down this road. For my American folks, 100 kilometers per hour is maybe like 65 miles an hour. I'm doing some rough math. I don't really know, but it's fast. And this is not a highway like in the traditional sense where it's raised and it's got barriers. No, it's like a street, but people treat it as a highway, and traffic is flowing both ways. It's kind of insane when I think about it from this viewpoint, having driven it so many times. So having this perspective already, this is already where the tension is already high because we got the last chapter and now this kid's on the highway. He's being called by a mysterious voice, and then the disorientation shows up. And I kind of took a this summer I read a very interesting book called House of Leaves. House of Leaves is a very unconventional horror book that it has just crazy formatting. It's basically a horror story about a house that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. That's like the tagline, but it's about a lot more than that. But one of the things that the author did really well is he plays a lot with presentation. The presentation of the way the text is shown to you as a reader is a very meta for the maze and labyrinth-like quality of the story. So I wanted to emulate that here. I wanted to kind of get that disorienting effect for the reader to really feel how kind of in a bad way this kid is. So I wrote a very long paragraph where there's just words smashed together. There's a sentence that's backwards. I didn't go too crazy with it because I still wanted it to be readable, but I feel like it had the effect, that I wanted, and I dropped periods in certain parts and just had, like, capitalizations to kind of hint at here's where one sentence ends and begins. I feel like it's a very strong part of this chapter. After that disorientation, then we get the the first the first or the I guess this is the second demon that shows up, the second, otherworldly being that shows up in the story that the human characters actually interact with. And this is a Kijimuna. A Kijimuna is a sprite-like spirit. It looks like a little cave boy in a loincloth. It's a local island. If you go to Okinawa, you will see this Kijimuna. It's kind of a mascot, an unofficial mascot of the island, and you'll just see it all over. You'll see it on posters, you'll see it on signs, and for the purposes of this chapter, there is a statue of one not far from the setting from where this scene takes place. It's actually like down the street. I really wanted it to where it was like right there in the scene, but it just geographically it just didn't work. But anyway, I have him flash in Tingo's mind, and this character appears, and they're kind of like just kind of fun loving spirits, and they can be kind of like they look like children, so it's fabled that only the young at heart can see them, right? So, but it's like one of those things like everybody can fucking see it. So it's just one of those island beliefs that's kind of fun. But I wanted to bring this character in and really introduce this uncertainty that not only Tingo has about him, but that the reader has about this this sprite as well. Is he really being benevolent? Is he really wanting to help Tingo and the others close the gates as he claims, or is there something more sinister at work? Because they can be tricksters. That's a big factor in a lot of Japanese demons. The trickster is, you don't know if they're going to be on your side or not. And so I wanted to introduce that with some fun dialogue because I just love writing dialogue. So we get this kind of fun exchange, but still tense, right? We're still on the side of the road. Tango's confused and he's really in a bad way. I have him puke all over the sidewalk because he's being pushed and pulled by this kind of time distortion. And so he just pukes all over the sidewalk. He gets up and then he has this conversation with the Kijimuna, and the sprite's like, I need your help. I need to get my staff back. If I can get my staff back, then I can help you close the gates. That's kind of the deal. But in order for me to do that, you have to kind of pass this trial. And trials are a big part of Gates of Okinawa. And this is very much borrowed from just all the video games I've played. It's the classic Legend of Zelda design and it's not just Legend of Zelda. A lot of games do this to where, you want to get the magical item, but you're going to have to go through some shit to get it. You're going to have to go through a dungeon. You have to fight some enemies, fight a boss, navigate a maze, solve some puzzles, that type of thing. And so I really wanted to adapt that to the book in different forms. And so this is the first trial in the book, basically, to where the Kijimuna's like, yeah, my staff's across the highway, but you got to cross the street in live traffic with your eyes closed. And of course, Tango's like, what the fuck? Are you kidding me? But then he kind of lays out the stakes that, if you don't do this, then the gates aren't going to get closed, and that's not going to be a good thing for you. And I love this metaphor that I put in there that the Kijimuna kind of casually slips in, is like, it's like leaving the door open and flies coming in. And if you've ever lived in a tropical place, a subtropical place like Okinawa or Hawaii or something like that, there's bugs everywhere. And so you leave the door open, then flies are just a pain in the ass. They just get everywhere, and then you're slapping around or spraying around to try and get rid of them. And so this is kind of the analogy, right? If we don't close the gates, you're gonna have a lot of flies in your house. And Tango, of course, is hesitant, but then he goes through the trial, and then this is the reason why this chapter is so long, because I had to describe the trial, and I had a hard time kind of going through and making it interesting and making it to where it's not too thin, but then it's not too repetitive. AI was really helpful in getting me to dial in, like to make each attempt stand out and make it like refine it to where it was nice. So he goes through the trials, and then in the end, I'm not going to spoil what happens, but at the end there's a cliffhanger to where there's a new threat that emerges, and it ends with Xena and the rest of the characters showing up and basically telling Tingo to run. And that's the end of the chapter. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive. I want to do. Let me know what you think of these. I wanted to do more of these. This is kind of my goal for these behind the scenes, not only using it as episode of the digital novelist because it all relates to novel writing. You can see kind of my process and how I think about things, but then also giving just some context behind how these chapters come about, because it's not random. Almost everything in Gates of Okinawa is somehow based on actual experience. Of course, I've never crossed Highway 58 with my eyes closed. That would be crazy. Because what would happen in real life is that people would just stop until you pause. This happens all the time in Okinawa. Just people with traffic. Traffic does tend to be slower than certainly than I'm used to in the US. But people would just stop and they would wait for you. But we got to dial it up. We this is a thriller. This is a horror novel, and I'm really happy with the way this chapter turned out. There's really a balance between the the Kijimuna and uh, the Kijimuna's kind of playful, kind of laissez-faire type of personality with Tango. Of course, Tango is a more studious character. He tends to be more serious. Very in Japanese, they would say majime na hito. Uh, very, he's a more intense type of guy, and he's a thinker. He's the kind of otaku like, like nerd like that type of thing, but then very knowledgeable and very sincere. Thanks for joining me on this quick episode of the Digital Novelist Podcast. As usual, if you want more resources for starting your own novel, head to keithhayden.net. You'll find a ton of resources there, and you'll also find a repository of all of these behind the scenes audio, video, documents, all sorts of stuff in the Gates of Okinawa Digital Novelist Starter Kit Deluxe Package. I'm so happy to have had the foresight to offer this to you, to actually bring all of these resources together to hopefully help you write your first or whatever number novel. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.